All right, good morning then. I'll call the meeting to order. Melissa, if you'd like to do the roll call?
Okay, Miss Avila Farias. Here. Mr. Schaefer for Treasurer Chung. Ms. Gallagher. Here. Dr. Imbasiani. Mr. Gunning. Mr. Hunter. Ms. Johnson Hall.
Here.
Mr. Metcalf.
Here.
Ms. Hoffman for Secretary Podesta.
Here.
Mr. Russell. Ms. Sotelo. Mr. Prince.
Present.
We are just shy of a quorum.
Yes, we did know that. So
Just shy.
we are going to go to the non-action items and then come back up to 2 and hit the action items when Tim arrives. Okay. And so with that, I'll make one quick comment, which is I'm trying to set the bar for Mr. Gunning to keep meetings under an hour or something like that, so I have no comments, and I'll turn it over to Tia.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of you may know, May 6th through May 12th is Public Service Recognition Week. And so often we have our unsung heroes. And so marketing took on an extraordinary effort to give shout out to various divisions within the California Housing Finance Agency. And I just wanted to read to you all the average years of service that we have within CalHFA so that you can understand the commitment of and the level of employees that we have. But in our admin department, the average years of service are 11. Financing average years of service are 21. Risk management, 18. Fiscal services, 15. Multifamily lending, 13. Executive, 7. Marketing, 9. Asset management, 19. IT, 11. Single family, 14. Legal, 11. And the Keep Your Home California, which is our federal, our nonprofit that administers our federal hardest hit funds, 13 years of public service. So I wanted to give a shout out to CalHFA. Employees do come and they actually do stay. Additionally, I wanted
Hold
to.
on. And Melissa, can you just show that Mr. Schaefer is now here? And we have a
Yes,
quorum?
We
Thank you.
now have a quorum.
Thank you. And I wanted to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts of a few retirees who will have either announced their retirement or will be leaving shortly. Sue Durney, who left recently, and I was unable to acknowledge her, had put in 15 years of state service with CalHFA, and she retired on May 10th. So I would like to give a shout out on the record for Sue Durney and her extraordinary work that she had done in asset management. Henry Sharp, one of our inspectors in our Southern California office, has 13 years of state service and 26 years of state service with the SCO. Yes. Oh my goodness. Henry's been with us with the state a long time. So he's going to be retiring in June. And last but not least, the extraordinary work of Deborah Starbuck, who has showed dedication and commitment over this last year in filling the role of our credit officer. She will be retiring at the end of the month. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the extraordinary public service of the dedicated employees of CalHFA.
Then we should recognize them. Thank you. With that, we will go back to the item 2, which is the adoption of the minutes. And the minutes of April 12th, 2018 meeting have been distributed. If there are any objections to the minutes being approved, are there any objections to the minutes being approved as distributed? If none, the minutes are approved. And that will take us to item 4. And we'll start with the Hookston Senior Project.
This first, multifamily has a lot on the agenda today, so we have 6 projects, so we will get through it as best we can, quickly as we can. I'd like to introduce Sabrina Saxton, who will walk us through the first project, the Hookston Senior Project in Pleasant Hill, California.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hookston Senior Apartments is a existing CalHFA portfolio project. It's 100 units of senior housing. It's in the city of Pleasant Hill, Contra Costa County. It was built originally in 1971. CalHFA came on board in the early 90s with a rehab and a refinance. The site consists of 3 residential buildings. Each building is 2-story and has its own elevator. And then there is also a substantial or a large community building. The unit mix is mostly 1-bedrooms with some 2-bedrooms. The original financing structure that CalHFA did in the early 90s had funding from the city of Pleasant Hill as well as the county of Contra Costa. Both of those loans will be paid off. We're still working out the details of how that will work, but both entities have agreed. So they will be paid off. The affordability will remain essentially the same, which is 10% of the units, or 10 units at 30%, 70% at 50% of AMI, and the balance at 60% of AMI with 1 manager's unit. The county currently administers 24 project-based vouchers to help subsidize the rent for the units. They will be adding 15 more project-based vouchers, as well as they are adding 5 RAD vouchers, which come from, they're relocating the RAD vouchers from another property and assigning them to this one. So all total, once the project has gone through renovation, there will be 44 of the 100 units will be subsidized with vouchers. The scope of the work to be done includes upgrading the unit, kitchens, bathrooms, and flooring. A few units won't need upgrading because they've been upgraded recently. All new doors throughout. All the windows will be repaired and replaced as needed. The buildings will have repair and replace of the gutters, downspouts, siding, stucco, full exterior paint, upgrading the elevators, and then some substantial plumbing and HVAC upgrades. There will be some improvements to the community building, as well as some landscaping and site drainage will be improved. So the request from Satellite Affordable Housing to CalHFA is for almost $24 million acquisition rehab loan. So this would be one of the few rehab loans that we'll be making, as well as a $10 million perm takeout loan. And we anticipate using, this will be one of the final deals with our FFB Treasury program. The project has been in our portfolio now for almost 20 years. It's been performing very well, and so we have made some accommodations on the reserves to basically maintain their current level of reserve funding, which has been sufficient for the life of the project thus far. Are there any questions?
I have a question. Excuse me. Do we know how long the construction will take, and where will the residents be moved to when they're?
So we're anticipating the actual rehab period to be about 12 months, and then an additional 6 months to sort of finish up everything. There will be no permanent relocation. There will be some temporary relocation, and they're working on a relocation plan right now to ensure that all the relocation meets the federal criteria. So they'll be relocated in the area.
And all those residents will have the right to return.
Yes, absolutely. And it'll only be, yes, and it'll be pretty short term for like a week or maybe 2 weeks if their unit is getting a full makeover.
Got it.
But yes.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? You know, I was just gonna say earlier that without Delilah and Steven here and me chairing, you guys are really gonna have a fast, lucky day. I think so. But I think this is a great development. I did have, you know, one comment. I think there's an equity contribution, and so can you talk about that
Yes,
road
there
quickly?
is an equity contribution, and the borrower is still working on pulling together all of their final financing. They're working to find an investor and their equity. But basically, the borrower has agreed to make up whatever difference whatever gap is still remaining, and in the form of either a seller note and or a seller contribution. And so those amounts will be sort of finalized once they have their other lender, once they have their investor selected.
And I noticed within this one and some of the others, and I don't know if everyone saw it, but what is now happening is that the developer fee is pretty substantial with a large seller note, or not, owner note, developer note coming back in. And so that is happening here. I didn't quite get to the math about, I'm hoping they're getting some developer fee out of the development as well. I mean, it's important for our developers, particularly nonprofits, are sustainable.
And they do have they are deferring a large portion of their developer fee, but then that will be paid back to them, over the next 10 years.
Well, and I should say, the reason why the developer fee is so large is so it generates the tax credit contributions and things like that. So it's a great use. I just want to make sure we saw that and we're understanding why there's such a large owner note. Okay, are there any other comments or questions? And that's good.
I was just going to add, I think this is a great project. It's actually in my backyard, literally 10 minutes away from my home.
great.
So it's always great to see projects emerge that, have been affordable housing for, over 25 years. And then us, keeping them, preserving them affordable by refinancing them and, closing out county deals and bringing it to one central loan. And this is a great location, transportation, downtown to Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to see that CalHFA took the lead in, refinancing this deal to rehab it. So it's a wonderful project.
I totally agree. I was going to send a note to my friend Joseph and saying this is wonderful and glad to see that you're also doing a creative way of RAD units. But are there any other questions? And I promise, 11:15 still. Hearing none, we have a motion to accept, to adopt, to invest.
A motion.
Second. Oh,
We have a motion and a second. Do a roll call.
Ms. Avila Farias?
yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Excuse me, Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
And Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Resolution 18-15 is approved.
Thank you.
I'd like to bring up Ruth Vakili, loan officer for the Summer Park Apartments in Fresno project.
And I just want to state for the record, while this is in Fresno, that there is no relationship with the Fresno Housing Authority. We had talked about whether I needed to recuse myself, and we decided I did not, since the Housing Authority has no financial position in this transaction.
Thank you.
Good morning. This project is also a portfolio refinance, as is the next one that I'm going to present. And there's some similarities in the financing structure. Summer Park Apartments is a family project in Fresno, 248 units and 17 residential buildings, so fairly large family project. It's in the southeastern portion of Fresno, and it's been in our portfolio since 1998. It's located in a built-out, mature area in Fresno, and the area consists primarily of single-family and some multifamily residences. It's located a bus stop right in front of the project, and retail, schools, and medical facilities are all within 1 mile of the project. Being that it's a large family project, there are a number of 2 bedrooms, there's 176, and there are 24 3-bedrooms and 48 1-bedrooms. The buildings are all 2-story walk-up. The project also includes a community room, offices, a pool, laundry room, and a sports court. It's 100% affordable to families in the 50% AMI to 60% AMI range. Over the last 3 years, the project has maintained about 96 to 97% occupancy. And being that it was built in 1976, it received substantial upgrades about 20 years ago when CalHFA financed the permanent loan. Since then, it has not had substantial rehab. We're planning now on doing substantial rehab on the project to the tune of about $69,000 a unit. The project is going to have a brand-new community building built. It's about 2,500 square feet, and that will be placed on an existing very large sports court. The exterior repairs are going to consist of new siding, new roofing, gutters, downspouts, replacing lighting and repairing balconies, repairing the landscape and drainage, and installing ADA-compliant sidewalks for accessibility. There's also going to be pool repairs and modifying the sports court and adding additional parking. The community building that will be built will house the offices, a kitchen, meeting spaces, a computer lab, fitness room, and space for after-school programs. The units will be improved with all new cabinets and countertops, flooring, and paint. The HVA systems, energy-efficient lighting, appliances, water heaters. Basically, they're going to go through and do all of the rehab that needs to be done in these units. There will also be 25 units that will be upgraded to comply with ADA standards. During the rehab, there's going to be relocation and all on site. Currently, the developer has planned that 2 buildings will be vacant. These 2 buildings are already primarily vacant right now, and they're moving the last tenants into existing units that are on site. Once these buildings are completely vacant, that will be the first phase of the rehab. It will be a rolling rehab, and once the first phase is complete, tenants will be permanently located into the newly renovated units. So all of the relocation will be on site, and there will be several phases. Once the last phase is complete, then the 2 buildings will be occupied by new tenants that are currently on the waiting list. Being that this is a large family project, it's been in our portfolio for quite some time. The age of the project and the level of management that's required to keep a large family project in good operating order. The operating costs are somewhat higher on this project than would normally be the case. We had to, therefore, change our financing structure than what you would normally see. We are requesting a 35-year first mortgage of $3,026,000 and a second mortgage, a bridge loan of $2.5 million, and that's for a 15-year term. And in addition, we're providing a gap loan of $2.5 million. All this together so that there will generate sufficient funds for a substantial rehab. I wanted to add that we did recently receive the appraisal on the project, and the value is $9 million. Our total loan to value is 89%. In addition to our financing, the equity investor that is under consideration has an offer in for $1 per credit rather than the 97 cents that we were expecting. So the developer is getting a good result from their bids. Also, a construction lender will be selected in the next week or so, and will provide the construction loan of over $26 million that we will then pay off with tax credit equity and our new loans. Also included in the financing structure is, similar to the previous project, a large seller carryback loan and a loan from the developer, EAH. In addition, there are 2 sources of energy rebates that will be paid to EAH and then loaned back to the project. There's also a deferred developer fee that will be paid back over 10 years out of residual receipts. The borrower is Summer Park LP, and the developer is EAH, who has several projects, 8 projects actually, in our portfolio. And EAH is a very experienced developer who does a lot of service-oriented housing and has done many in-place rehabs that also involve large relocation efforts. The architect will be R.L. Davidson, that has been a architect that EAH has worked with in several projects in the past. So the architect has already gone through and scoped out all of the work, and the cost of the work is in the process of being bid out. With that, I will take any questions.
Any comments, questions? Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to authorize a final loan commitment to Summer Park in Fresno, California.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The first and a second. Have a question. Can I ask a question? Oh, yes, if we have a question, yes, of course.
So the $2.5 million bridge loan is a taxable bond?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Seeing no other questions, let's have a vote.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes,
Resolution 18-16 is approved.
fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Willow Glen.
I'll ask Ruth to stay here and present the Village at Willow Glen project.
Village at Willow Glen is also a portfolio project. This project is located in San Jose in the Willow Glen area, and it's been in our portfolio since 2002. It's about 2.5 miles from downtown San Jose in the more mature Willow Glen area, a highly desirable area of San Jose, and primarily multifamily and single-family residences. And this project is also very well located near a senior center and all levels of retail and hospital. The project is 121 one-bedrooms and 12 two-bedroom units in 2 residential buildings. Each building has 1 elevator, and each building also includes a community room and laundry rooms. There's also a media room and a spa on site. The project is 100% affordable, with rents ranging from 45% AMI to 50% AMI, and 20 of the units are supported by project-based Section 8 contract, which has a 15-year term. The contract is administered by the Housing Authority of the County of Santa Clara and was just recently renewed with a new contract term starting in April. The project has consistently been between 98 to 100% occupied, and might I add, it's very nice living conditions, so I can imagine why it's constantly 100%, 98 to 100% occupied. The location is excellent as well. Even so, the project is going to undergo substantial rehab of about $42,000. And common area improvements will include upgrading the community rooms and kitchens, remodeling the theater and laundry rooms. The office spaces will be completely reconfigured. There will also be new carpet and paint and lighting and security systems in the common areas. The exterior repairs will consist of replacement of roofs and lighting, repairing concrete for ADA compliance, landscape and irrigation and drainage repairs, repairing the existing spa equipment, and upgrading the outdoor furnishings. The units themselves will be fully upgraded too. Unit improvements will consist of new appliances, cabinets, and plumbing in the kitchens, new tubs and plumbing fixtures in the baths and cabinets as well as flooring, paint, and lighting. The HVA systems will be replaced, and 12 units will be upgraded for ADA compliance. Also throughout the project, new hot water boilers will be installed, and plumbing will be upgraded. And this project, since it, since it is fully occupied, it will require off-site relocation of tenants. Most of the tenants will be off-site for about a week, and they will be housed in identified residence inns and hotels in the nearby area. They'll be offered moving assistance, and all the moving expenses and cost while they're out of the unit will be paid for by the project. The project has 12 units that will be upgraded to ADA compliance, and those tenants will be out for about 2 weeks. So there's a budget of about $750,000 to pay for all the moving expenses and off-site meals and transportation. We are requesting approval of a loan of $16,310,000. It's a 40-year loan, and the interest rate is based on Treasury plus 230 basis points spread. This project is also financed through the FFB program. And we did recently receive an appraisal on the project of $27 million, and that would result in a 60% loan to value. Union Bank is going to be the construction lender and tax credit equity investor, and they've offered equity priced at 99 cents. We had originally estimated 95 cents. So the offers coming in are very strong. The City of San Jose has an existing loan on the project. It will be paid down by $3.9 million, and the city will extend their affordability restrictions. The city will also, in exchange, have a new requirement that adds 13 units that will be available for their city program, which is called the Transition in Place Program. We've mentioned that a couple of times on other San Jose projects, and this is a new program that, in exchange for restructuring their and extending their existing loans, they ask for the developer to add units that will be available to homeless tenants, and they will. That's why it's called the Transition in Place Program, so that people are transitioning out of homelessness into secure housing. The tenants will be referred by the City of San Jose. They'll also receive rental assistance and case management services as needed, and any kind of supports necessary, and the funds are provided by the city through a fund that's already been generated and set aside for this purpose. In addition to the financing that I mentioned, there's also a seller loan that is provided by the existing owner, and also we have a deferred developer fee, and we're also estimating some income during rehab that will be generated and added towards the cost of the rehab. Related housing, or related companies, is the developer, and the new borrowing entity will be Village at Willow Glen Housing Partners. Related Property Management will be the manager, who's presently the manager and will continue to remain as manager. Related has several projects in our portfolio, and throughout California and Hawaii, the management company manages 246 properties, so a very experienced developer. In addition, they have contracted with Wright Architects as the architect, and this is the same firm that provides the architectural services for the rehab projects. And the general contractor selected is Portrait Construction, which is a construction company that has a considerable amount of experience in in-place rehab and multifamily and single-family new construction. Are there any questions on this project?
Yes, please.
I just want to go back to item 8, which is on the AHRP units. So it seems like the development, it's a multifamily development with 2-bedroom units that predominantly houses seniors, but yet we have a transitional housing component on there. And just kind of curious of historically, what's the age group on that? Because as we've seen, sometimes it has a lot going on, and housing different types of people on there. So I'm just kind of curious of how this overlay is going to work in this new model.
The AHRP is actually the tenant in place. I think I've been referring to it in the old vernacular, but the AHRP program is the tenant in place program. And this project, the age that the project is available to is 55 and above. So that does provide some more flexibility to when you're selecting tenants. And so there are, as everybody knows, there are every age range of homelessness, and specifically finding properties that are offered to senior homeless is a little more difficult. So this is going to provide a real benefit to that population that is sometimes harder to house in general population projects. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, because I was unclear, but that's what I wanted to get there, is that it was for senior homeless, not under, because that's problematic.
You're correct, it is senior only.
Okay.
I also have a question, and actually it's related to the same thing that Anne Marie spoke of. I guess you did point out the fact that this is a new program, and so as I was sitting here thinking about new programs in my experience as a banker and former developer was, do we really need to maybe think about, on this particular one, the reserves a little bit differently? Because we don't know when those funds are, we don't know how that's going to work just yet. Just wondering if the staff thought about that.
We have. I did look a lot into the program. My thought was that, requiring a certain number, say 10% of the units to this kind of a program could result in a little bit of risk to
Right.
the overall occupancy.
Yeah, because the debt
And-
service is right at 115, so one little bump, even though 13 units is not a big number, it's significant of a bump that it might have some residual impact to some of the other lenders who are in the capital stack.
It could, and that's the reason that we have required CalHFA to hold the operating reserve on this project and on the other projects that I presented in the past couple of months that have the same program, so that if there is an impact on the project, then you have the operating reserve. That's one thing that's a mitigant. The second thing is that this project, I'm underwriting vacancy to 5%, but it's historically been a 2% vacancy. So you
some
automatically have
cushion.
a cushion there, and we stress the underwriting in that way, even in a market like this that has, incredible occupancy rates. So there's a couple of ways that we look at it.
Thank you.
So I love the creativity of what we're seeing. I don't know what the statewide numbers are, Ben, in terms of demand for housing. I know it's like 40,000 units in Fresno, so statewide it's got to be in the millions, right? And to prioritize and think about how to use limited resources, to me, is really important. And so I congratulate the developer for thinking about that. I did want to point out that the legislative districts, we like Jim and Arambula and are in Fresno. I think you have the wrong ones for Santa Clara. Just wanted to point that out. And with that, are there any other questions or comments? We're not giving up Arambula. He's doing a great job.
I would like to make a comment, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So I have been holding this particular project out as an example of state-local collaboration. And the fact that we were able to have units within an affordable housing project set aside specifically for homeless, we had to work very closely with the local government to say, in exchange for us restructuring our debt, we would like to get this. And these are more of the types of collaborations I would like to have with local government so that we could get out of we can get at the various housing needs that we have with our limited resources. So I have been holding this particular project out as an example of that.
Yeah, I think it's very collaborative, creative. I think it's wonderful it made me a little jealous. We've seen two housing authorities doing great things, and then Fresno is in between, not part of a project. So you need to keep pushing for the local collaboration. Yes, I'm picking on myself. So are there other questions or comments? So then, is there a motion to adopt Resolution 1817, authorizing a final loan commitment for villages at Willow Glen?
So moved.
Second.
There's a first and a second. Any other questions? Hearing none, we can do a vote.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Resolution 18-17 is approved.
Thank you. So for this next project, I'd like to bring up Enoch Young. He's an underwriting specialist who works on Ruth's team and took the lead on this project. Just a little bit of background on this particular transaction. I think about a year ago, staff presented to the board the concept of a pilot for NOAA, or naturally occurring affordable housing. So for this transaction in Stockton, CalHFA provided gap financing, and we took the unusual step of advancing that first, and in partnership with a CDFI, Century Housing, this enabled the developer to acquire the property quickly and take it off the market and do the stabilization and initial repair work for the project. So what we're bringing you today, a year later, is the permanent takeout for the project as it is nearing stabilization. So with that, I'll turn it over to Enoch.
Thank you. Good morning. Inglewood Oaks Apartment is a 64-unit acquisition and moderate rehab family housing project in Stockton. This is a residential project that is being financed through CalHFA's NOAA program for short. The project is located in Stockton in a residential neighborhood near a major thoroughfare that consists primarily of commercial uses. The project is near shopping, community amenities such as hospital, school, and recreational facilities. The Stockton rental market is very strong, as evidenced by the average vacancy rate of 1.8% for market rate properties. The project itself has had a historical vacancy rate of 2%. The subject's rents are at 3% to 40% below market rents. The 64-unit project consists of 10 two-story buildings with 40 one-bedroom units, 22 two-bedroom units, and 2 three-bedroom units. The project includes 86 uncovered parking spaces. The project is 100% affordable, with rents ranging from 50% to 80% AMI. The project amenities include a laundry room, swimming pool, and a one-story management office. The units have carpeting, central heating, air conditioning in the 2 and 3-bedroom units, with wall electric air conditioners and heaters in the 1-bedroom units. Kitchen appliances include range, refrigerator, dishwasher in the 2 and 3-bedroom units. For the scope of rehab, the scope of work items in the exterior include repairing walkways, installing safe handrails, repairing treads for the exterior stairs, additional landscaping, fence repair, as well as installing new AC in the laundry room, as well as new roofing and repainting of the exteriors. For the scope of work items for the units, there's going to be new insulation, new window replacements, and new sliding glass doors. Ongoing replacement of the project elements during the operations will follow the replacement reserve schedule. These elements include refurbished balcony enclosures, new water heaters, wall-mounted heaters, packaged HVAC systems, carpet, vinyl flooring, dishwasher, refrigerator, and electric range and stove. So for the financing, as Michael had mentioned, CalHFA is providing a permanent loan of $5,490,000, amortized over a 40-year term. The rate was locked at 4.42%. That's based on the 10-year Treasury, plus 235 basis points at the time we locked this, was in September of 2017 when we did the acquisition closing. Century is providing an acquisition loan of $5,400,000 at an interest rate of 5.75%, all of which will be paid off with the CalHFA perm loan. As also mentioned before, CalHFA provided a gap loan that closed in September of 2017. That was part of that acquisition closing. That gap loan is for $1,280,000 for 55 years at the AFR at the time of 1.93%. Upon closing of the permanent loan, the borrower will begin rehabilitation of the project. The rehab should take about 6 to 8 months. As far as the cash flows and operations, the permanent loan was originally underwritten assuming no property tax exemption. This was done to mitigate any risk that the project would not initially qualify for a tax exemption and be subject to a full property tax. Since the initial underwriting, we verified that approximately 50% of the households are 80% AMI or below. We verified that 20% of the total units are at 50% AMI. Over time, through attrition, the remaining over-income units will be leased out to incoming tenants that qualify for 80% AMI or below. Once the property tax exemption is in place, it will allow for surplus cash flow to pay for developer fees, of which the developer is not taking any upfront developer fees, as well as funds to pay for repairs over time through the replacement reserves. The borrowing team is TCD WFH Inglewood LP, a California limited partnership. Triton Development Corporation is the developer/sponsor and has developed over 7 tax credit properties. 3 projects are currently in the CalHFA portfolio. Property manager is FPI Management, which has substantial experience in managing affordable housing since 1968. The contractor will be Day Builders, Inc., a general contractor that specializes in rehab for affordable multifamily projects throughout California. With that, I'll take any questions.
I think it's great to have taken that risk on the naturally occurring affordable housing and then being able to actually refinance it. So congratulations on that. I think it's a great step. Are there any comments, questions? Yes, ma'am.
So Enoch, you said you guys verified 50% of the occupants were at 80% AMI or below,
yeah.
but we underwrote it as if 53%. So how are we mitigating that risk of the property taxes being higher than we underwrote?
Yeah, so when we actually originally underwrote and sized the loan, we were assuming no property tax exemption. Yeah.
On that point, is that, I know it's really as something other than a static risk, so that can, if the income levels of the current tenants rise, what would happen to them?
Well, at the time when we verify, they're at 80% AMI. And so if they were to increase, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would imagine that there could be the potential where that property tax exemption would go away, but that's subject to verification.
No.
No? Okay.
Once you have a regulated unit that's regulated as low income, then it's a property tax exemption
Okay.
Tony's up to 140, up to 140% of the area median. And we can thank Mr. Sablehouse, who's sitting back in the back, for that
Okay.
legislation that we had recently.
Stand corrected. Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer?
No questions. Are you ready for a motion?
I am. I'm
Can
looking
I,
for
can
a
I
motion
just,
on 18,
sorry, I just wanted
18.
to comment here. I know
Sure.
it was a
Sure.
great project for its NOAA aspect, but also I just want to flag the CDFI partnership. I mean, this is something that
Sure.
CalHFA has been really trying to build out strategic partnerships. Century is a great lender, and I hope we can get more deals. We're working with them too as the takeout source for getting in these deals that the big banks don't necessarily want to play in. So,
Totally agree.
great project.
So with,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Let me just add. As we try to reach the missing middle, this is one of our strategies to get at that population that isn't in subsidized housing because there aren't any lending products that's targeting that 60 to 80% AMI. So this is CalHFA's attempt to fill that niche. And we started that prior to the SB2 funds coming in so that we can test various lending structures so that we could determine how we could best fit that missing middle. And so this is one of our strategies to go at the missing middle.
So, is there a motion to adopt 1818, authorizing a final loan commitment to Inglewood Oaks?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, are there any other questions? Hearing none, we'll do a vote.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Resolution 18-18 is approved.
Thank you.
And Tia kind of stole my thunder, but in my 3 years, we've never had the venerable Mr. Sablehouse in the room, so I'm just excited you're here. Trying to be on my best behavior just because of you.
I'm going to switch chairs here now. The next two projects were underwritten by loan officer Steve Lyerly. If you could come over, I want you to get the slideshow, please. Steve has a family business that prevented him from being here today, so he asked me to present, and I did that only on the condition that our underwriting specialist, Stephen Beckman, join me, because he's intimately involved in underwriting both of these deals. So I haven't done loan officer duty for a while. I kind of use the analogy since it's baseball season of bringing the manager out of the dugout to pinch hit. So you'll bear with me.
Make sure you don't do like what the Mets did yesterday and bat out of order.
Right. So with that, if I could ask you to bring the slides. even while we- This first project.
Hit enter. Oh, that, perfect.
So the Market Street Apartments is 80-unit, new construction, mixed-use project, 100% affordable in Redding, California. The developer is K2 Developers, which is, they're new to us at CalHFA, but they have good experience as a developer, and they're working with Mr. Sablehouse as a consultant who knows our programs intimately. They are requesting a $3.1 million permanent takeout loan, which will also be FFB financed, as are most of the projects today, and a $1.6 million earned surplus subsidy loan. The financing structure for the project, they've separated three components into condominiums. So the housing piece, which is what we are financing. There's a commercial piece, which a local bank will finance. And then the parking garage will be operated on a lease arrangement with the city. So CalHFA financing is strictly dedicated to the housing piece. The project includes solar, so that tenants will pay not have very much of a utility bill. That will accrue to the benefit of the tenants. Our loan is leveraging significant other resources, including money from our sister agency HCD for the AHCS program, the cap and trade money. That's $5.8 million. And the city of Redding is providing significant support of $10.1 million. This is a 4% tax credit deal. The construction lender will be Citibank, and the tax credit investor is Redstone Equity Partners. You will remember Matt from Redstone was at our last board meeting, so their group will be the investor. I would note that this is also a project that will take advantage of the newly enacted tax legislation that allows for income averaging on the tax credit program, so that we have a mix of 80% and 50 and 60% units. I know that Matt, I was at a conference with Matt earlier this week, and he was touting this as the first in the nation to take advantage of that. So there's that aspect. So the project is ready to go. They're looking to close and start construction in mid-June. in order to meet their SIDLAC deadline. And I think I'll leave it at that and leave it open for questions.
The other presenters quoted the current tax credit pricing on those.
Yes.
I'm curious what the ranges on this.
I think we're.
For in Reading, we were at about, I think we were thinking 90 cents. Certainly isn't the 99 cents you're gonna get in the Bay Area. Yeah,
Yeah.
we knew that. So, yeah.
Definitely a regional difference there.
Again, being creative, the first one to do the income averaging, that's like pretty exciting and cool. Are there any questions? So, is there a motion to adopt resolution 1819, authorizing a final loan commitment to, the Market Street Apartments?
I move that we approve resolution 1818.
Motion? Second. And a second? Any other questions? Tia? Hearing none, let's have the vote.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Resolution 18-19 is approved.
I feel like we should have had all kinds of questions for you, Pat, but we'll let you off the hook.
Well, Patrick is involved in the next deal as well.
Oh,
so-
okay, so we might do.
Yeah.
So the next project is Truckee Artist Lofts. It is also a new construction, 90-unit, mixed-use, mixed-income family project in Truckee and Nevada County. The developer is CFY Development, very experienced developer and repeat CalHFA customer. The loan requested is a permanent takeout loan of $9.8 million through the FFB program, and we were also asking to provide a $2.3 million subsidy loan. This project is part of a very interesting redevelopment project in Truckee that is taking advantage of Union Pacific Rail Yard. It is part of a master plan development, and it is a required inclusionary affordable housing piece. So the rest of the development can't occur until this one gets built. The project is leveraging, again, significant resources from other agencies. HCD, again, is providing $1.2 million from the Infrastructure Infill Grant Program. Local and private resources are providing $7.5 million. This is also a 4% tax credit deal. The construction lender is Chase, and you met Cecile at our last meeting. It's her organization that's providing construction financing. The project will restrict 76 or 84% of the units to 60% AMI and below. Part of the unique design of the project is that some of the spaces are available for local artists, and some of the commercial space will be used to enable them to show and sell their works. The rest of it will be for much-needed workforce housing in the Tahoe Resort area. So that is an overview of the project, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Are there any questions, comments?
There is a reference in here that that the developer will provide a preference for veterans. Can you just explain how they intend to implement that?
Yeah, that is a requirement that CalHFA imposes when we offer the subsidy program. And in practice, how it works is if you've got tenants coming in, two equally qualified tenants, you give preference to the veteran.
You get okay, so if you got two people coming in, one is a vet, one
They
isn't.
get preference.
That's awesome. I was hoping to hear more on the lines of how they might market to those folks to ensure that we get a higher percentage of that.
Well, as part of the closing process, we will have to review and approve their affirmative fair market housing plan.
Okay,
So we expect to see that in,
built into that
Yes.
document. All right, that's wonderful. I'm glad that we are looking at that as a priority.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, sir.
Well, you mentioned that well, they're called artist lofts, but there's no preference given to a local artist,
how does that
I'm
work,
assuming,
Stephen?
as it would be to a veteran.
Was there preferences to artists?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
There is.
There are a lot of folks in the Truckee area that are makers and artists. CFY Development did a project here in town called Warehouse Artist Lofts. And
Right,
it's
on our
somewhat modeled after that. It was a very successful project.
Any other questions about that? Tia?
So about 2 years ago, to complement the Veterans Housing and Homeless Program, we initiated a policy in which we would provide in our subsidy funds that those who accepted our subsidy funds would provide a veterans preference, so that we've had that policy for about 2 years. So I just wanted to let the board know that. In addition to that, I do want to give a shout out to the developer. You may recall his son, Ali, who worked very closely with us on these projects. And so we've been working very closely to get these to the finish line. And so I do want to give a shout out to the developer. He's been a very strong partner. And when I went to brief the assemblyman for these districts, Assemblyman Dolly, who is the Assembly Minority Leader, he loved these projects. So let's make sure you invite Assemblyman Dolly to the groundbreaking and the ribbon cutting, because he literally supported the FFB program and wrote letters to both Secretary Carson, Treasurer, and Ben to continue the FFB program and to be able to continue our strong financing, because he was very much aware of these projects and very much aware of the developers' work.
All right, I am looking for a motion to adopt Resolution 1820, authorizing a final loan commitment to the Truckee Artist Lofts.
I move that we approve Resolution 1820.
And I happily second.
With the motion and a second, are there any other questions? Hearing none, let's have a vote.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Resolution 18-20 is approved.
We are now on item 5, the discussion regarding increasing the executive director's existing authority under Resolution 0137 to enter into loans for the financing of multifamily housing development.
So before Michael gets started, let me just set the stage. Prior to the last couple of years, we met on every other month. And more recently, as our multifamily lending has become, getting back into the business, and we have more multifamily projects that have come before you, we are meeting on a monthly basis. And our meetings are running longer and longer. And I have heard from multiple board members about getting into the weeds, so to speak. And so as a measure of management and uplifting, I think we have taken on a process over the last 2 years to educate the board, to be more open and transparent about our underwriting and how we're doing that, improved our processes and procedures. And so that as a backdrop is what Michael is here to present and open the discussion about.
And before you say, if those of you whose items have passed, if you want to stay around, that's great, but if you want to leave, you won't hurt our feelings.
I think the loan officers have a vested interest in this discussion.
Well,
so
they
that-
get to stay. I was really talking about the developers who are here.
Okay.
And Pat.
Thank you. Yes, so you have the background memo in your board packet, and, just as a summary, the executive director's current authority at $4 million per loan goes back to 2001, so it hasn't been visited in a number of years. We did look at, prompted by discussion at the board last time, we went back and looked at.
Michael, I'm sorry, can you please close the door? I find that very distracted.
Sure.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we went back and looked at our pipeline of projects and sort of tiers of where they lay, and considered raising the limit for your consideration. We started at 10, but then opened it up to 10 to 15, kind of wherever you might be comfortable with. A $10 million approval level would allow staff to approve, at least in the current pipeline, 60% or more of the projects. If you take it up to 15 million, you probably have the staff do about 70%. And also as a reminder, current practice is for those projects that are approved at the staff level, they're always presented to you after the fact for your review and consideration, should you have any questions about that, as kind of a backstop for staff approvals. And as Tia mentioned, we have really strengthened the underwriting process and codified our standards so that we have a handbook for loan officers to use, and it's transparent and allows us to maintain consistency in the process and while mitigating our risk. So I think I will leave it at that and open it up for your discussion and consideration.
I just had a question. I'm wondering if there would be a problem in just holding this item over, just given the fact that we're missing so many board members and.
This isn't an action item.
Oh, okay.
We're not taking an action today. We wanted
Okay.
to elicit discussion
Okay.
and deliberation so that if the board chose, we could bring it back to you for a
Oh,
action.
I feel much better about that then. Okay, good.
Do you have some concerns you'd like to raise?
No, I think it makes sense because I think we've talked about in the retreats and other dialogue that we should be focused on the helicopter level of public policy around housing, and getting too much in the weeds of deals that could be handled in-house makes sense. What that threshold is, I think, is just going to be really different board members' perspectives, because we all come from different housing environments of what we feel comfortable with. So that's why I say I think that discussion's probably better with the full board, because we're all going to have different comfort levels. But I think we're headed in the right direction of thought process, that we should really be raising the dead, healing the sick kind of public policy kind of stuff. So those are my thoughts.
Eileen? And I know, Tim, you have comments too, I'm sure.
Just two things, three things maybe. The first one is, of the 6 we looked at today, it looks like
That was
only
my question too,
2 would
thank you.
rise to the threshold. If it were 10 million, only 2 would rise to the threshold of board action, and if it were 15, only 1. Is that a fair summary?
Yes,
Say that
but,
again? What?
I'm looking at what we approved today, the
Yeah.
6 financings, and I'm looking at it, it looked like only 2 of them had permanent financing greater than 10
Yeah.
million, only 1 greater than 15.
right, and the acquisition rehab one, if we were only looking at the permanent piece, would have qualified for staff approval. And we're trying to move away from the construction financing, so we expect there to be a greater number of loans.
And then my second question was like, who's on the loan committee? I know it's senior staff, but I wasn't sure.
It's the executive director, our chief credit officer, chief deputy director, myself, basically the senior staff, director of finance.
And the director of finance.
Yeah,
And a note also, HCD.
HCD.
Deputy
And-
Director. of
right,
Financial
exactly.
Assistance also sits on that.
Yes.
sorry, I forgot that.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think, from my perspective, a lot of the minutia here, it's not my area of expertise, and so it's going through all the pro forma, some of these things. My interest is more that big picture. What would be helpful to me to understand also is, of these, the portfolio that we're throwing these into, what percentage is 10 million or what percentage is 15 million? I don't have an intuitive sense of that off the top of my head. So what's the right level? I don't know. It's sort of how much risk is there? What are we talking about? 60 to 70% of the portfolio, or is that just current? That's what I'm looking for. I'm perfectly happy with the idea of this.
Right.
But to make an informed decision or thought on the level, that context would be helpful to me.
Right. And see, this is the kind of feedback we need so that when we do come back, we can provide this kind of information. I think I would also like to hear from you all are there things other than just a dollar threshold? If it is a certain amount of deviation or variance of which staff hasn't identified enough mitigation of risk, if it was on the, if it were one of those projects that it was new and innovative and creative and a lot was going on, I would bring that up to the board as well. And so I think some thought around when should it come up to the board, even if it is below a certain dollar level, some thought to that.
Yeah. Some of the things that we consider, well, first let me start by saying I am guilty of being one of the persons who very clearly stated that.
You weren't the only one.
Okay, good. That I wanted the staff to look at this for the express reason of creating greater efficiencies, but also to ensure that we meet these very important deadlines, because there are a lot of contingent deadlines from our partners at HCD, TCAC, and others. And so this would allow things to move quickly, but moreover give the team the ability to be more responsive to the developers. I mean, they often have, by us delaying this, it could also create additional costs to the projects that we want to avoid, because basically, if there are additional costs, it's likely to be covered by us. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot by doing that. Some of the other things that we use to determine whether they should come to the executive level board is exceptions to policy. Anything, and so I would like to see the staff look at what those exceptions might be and give a recommendation on those. Now, some of the exceptions, I'm sure, might be considered quite minor, but then there are some things that might be standouts. And so I'd like to see the staff think about that and come back with a recommendation. And then the other thing that I didn't hear Michael say, but I wanted to make sure that we were clear, was that the TIA, as the executive leader of the team, always has the ability to just say, I think this needs to go to the board. And so I want to make sure that she still retains that, even if it doesn't meet any of the other milestones. Okay, thank you.
I echo the same comments, Tina, but I think also in addition to policy exceptions would be maybe, and the threshold of the amount would be expanding the risk factor of what are those risks that we would warrant, when there's a lot, like Tia said, there's a lot going on in the project. Maybe there's some way we can create some threshold, like this has a lot going on, this is something that maybe should go to the board because of the identified risk factors in the pro forma.
One other thing that we look at is exposure. So if we have 300 million to one developer, we do look at exposure. How many dollars do we have in that particular region, or specifically to that particular customer, is something that we look at very closely.
Follow up on that, sorry. To follow up on that, do you guys have that? I mean, what would, again, in the weeds and some of this stuff, I don't feel like I'm adding any value, but looking at the big picture risk, there's obviously risk in any particular loan, but then it's the context, and so it's that, exposure of whether it's developers or types of housing or types of exposure to, HUD renewals or whatever the rate factors are, that holistic view and how an individual loan or a package of loans that was approved at the staff level changes that. Having periodic reports of that I think would be the right level that we're supposed to be looking at. And all the right metrics in that, I'm not off the top of my head sure of, but that's where I think we should be focusing.
And one of the things Michael and I and Tony have been working on is a asset management reporting that happens like on a quarterly basis, where you're looking at debt service coverage ratios of the entire portfolio, and that is something that is a priority for Michael, Tony, and I. And so I think that is more beneficial for me at that higher level, and I think would be more beneficial to you as the board at that higher level. So yes, that is something we're working on.
So I'm looking to this corner.
Well, thank you. the fact that we waited for a little while means that 95% of my questions got answered just by listening to the fellow board members. We will strongly support this because we think it keeps the board in a position where it's more focused on policy rather than on where the decimal points are. And I don't mean to disrespect the decimal points, but we do need to be thoughtful about that. The only thing that I would encourage fellow board members to think about here would be that while we're strongly supportive of it, this particular board member would like to see a management memorandum, just as an informational item for us, that describes how the internal approval process will work once the threshold is raised. I expect that it would address many of the questions that we've talked about here this morning and that we might anticipate from the board members that aren't here, and that we have the opportunity at least annually to review that management memorandum as circumstances change, as we know they will. And with that, I would strongly support the $10 million mark. I do think this, I didn't hear much on this other than from Ms. Gallagher. Before I could get comfortable with 10 versus 14 or a number, I'd want the kind of context that Ms. Gallagher was talking about as well, because I think, I don't know that there's a magic number. It would just give me some comfort.
And then my only other comment, obviously, we're all very comfortable with Tia knowing kind of what projects that may not fit the dollar threshold would, need to come to the board or would be good to come to the board. But, bearing in mind that we're going to have an administration change soon, and hopefully you'll still be here.
But yeah, something that could be documented and transferable.
Yep.
Right. Right. And just by way of example, the Willow Glen, even though it didn't meet the dollar amount, there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
That would have been one that I would have recommended come to the board, just so you have a basis of there was a lot going on at the local level, a lot of moving parts. That would have been definitely one I would have said, let's take this up to the board, because they need to see kind of this big picture.
I'll start by saying I've been very impressed since I have staff sitting on the internal loan committee on the integrity of that process. I think it's working very well. And I think obviously with CalHFA expansion into having a real risk oversight operation, we have now with CalHFA as board members an ability to really, it's like a luxury of being able to rely on the staff work in a way that I think arguably we couldn't have done even a couple of years ago. I'm I think conceptually very supportive. I think Tina nailed it for me. I honestly, you could go north from my perspective of the threshold that's being proposed, to the extent that this was a vanilla 130 debt coverage with a high capacity borrower. I think trying to think about, is there some I don't want to complicate things too much. I think I'm fine as drafted, but I think it's worth some thought. And I think if you look at other peer institutions, you see that level of delegation is a little bit tiered to get to sort of the risk points and having. But I think we also need to have some pretty clear. If we're going to do that, we need to have a pretty clear box. Okay, this is these are the high significant policy exception standards that trigger it to go back to the board, as well as relying on your discretion. But very supportive of where you're going.
Ms. Gallagher, do you have a final comment?
Just like a question that occurred to me when we were going through those 6 projects about the FFB and the ones that were FFB and are going away. It's not specific to this policy issue, but it had made me thinking, where are we in terms of the pipeline and with the loss of that program? And maybe that transitions into the later item on the budget, but so some of that context, the high level context of how, the funding sources, the programs we're using, so that when something goes away like that, we have a sense of what it does to our future.
Right. And Jen, unfortunately, our director of finance had a death in his family, so he wasn't here. So I think Tim or Tony are probably going to step in on his place. But we do have our loan product, which is our tax exempt bonds with our risk share, which is probably about 50 to 60 basis points higher than the FFB, which and with a 40-year term, it keeps us still in the ball game. It's not as good as FFB, and that is the product that we'll be using going forward. We're still continuing to push for FFB. I don't know if we're going to have any luck with that, but we do have our new term sheets out. We have been meeting with new developers. We have been issuing new LOIs based on those new term sheets, and we're kind of seeing how it's going to play out. We're also starting discussions on the SB2 funds that will be coming in next year for gap financing, and we're hearing back from developers, and we'll be having some listening sessions on that. And so what I think we'll do is at the next board meeting, we'll kind of give you a pipeline overview, Michael, about kind of, this is kind of what we have in our pipeline. And we will hear a little bit of some of that as well in the next presentation.
You know, just that in terms of risk, FFB may be going away, but HUD risk shares remain. So that's our primary risk mitigant, and we'll continue to use that for almost every deal.
Erica, did you have any comments? You okay? Yeah. I'm looking for someone to say, "Oh, I have concerns," because I hate to be the only one. But you know, I look around the table and I'm hearing like from people who are not nervous about this, right? And so that is giving me pause of like, well, why am I thinking wrong? But I love the comment about like really understanding the loan committee and thinking about how to make that. Mark, I don't understand what's the legal responsibility of us, and like, I mean, what's our, well, it's not the staff, but what happens if there is some kind of corruption that happens within this? What's the board's responsibility within that? I'm just a little, I would love this as the CEO of the Housing Authority. I wouldn't do it because I still think there's like some integrity of the board. So I just struggle with this personally, but I'm looking around the table and hearing from people. I thought Tim was gonna say it and he was like on board, so I was like, all right, I'm really off base on this, right? So I just wanted to say, I don't know how to mitigate it. I thought I loved hearing the 6 developments today. I hate to have that be only one, but maybe I have the wrong perspective. So I don't know what my concerns are, other than it seems like our responsibility.
Right, let me see if I can repeat back what your concern is, and so Mark can give Mark time to ponder the question.
Yeah.
And Tim Schaefer, who is an expert in public finance. The concern is, would the board be abdicating too much of its fiduciary duty and not seeing loans at a certain dollar amount? And that if there was something going on that didn't come to the board, how much of that would come back on the board?
Right, and I'm not personally,
But,
'cause I
right,
don't think.
but would you be, by raising the dollar threshold, be giving away too much of your authority? Or would that be seen as a breach of your fiduciary duty of oversight?
The application, as you said.
Yes.
That was the word that was bouncing around in my head, but I'm just want to throw out that I think I'm the only one. If I'm the only one, then I'm pretty sure that you had good direction from everyone else to keep moving forward, so.
Go ahead, Mark.
I mean, I believe that, you know, the board doesn't have to get into weeds on everything. They are supposed to be at a higher level, and a lot of it comes down to the oversight and the processes that you have in place that ensure that you are able to prevent any type of problem or corruption like you're worried about, you know, with regard to the loan processes, and that's where the reporting comes into place. You know, after these loans are made, any continuing reporting, the board has the power to require something to be brought back before it again, more in depth, to get more information to ensure that the processes, because that's the higher level thing, are in place to ensure that there aren't any problems. So I think everybody is wise to look at the levels where that would be appropriate. And, you know, and that's subject to further discussion by the board, but I don't think this is outside of its power.
I think maybe a way we can mitigate, I mean, I don't think you're off point, Preston, because that is, we have a financial responsibility, a policy responsibility, but I think over the several months, we've kind of flourished into more of a policy arena. But maybe it can be mitigated in our agenda, that when we don't have a consent section, how we agendize our meetings. And consent areas are a great place to throw items that loan committee can go flesh things out. We as a board get the packet and say, oh, here's all the stuff they improved internally. oh, wait, that project looks kind of crazy. I'm not going to approve that. I'm going to pull it off consent to bring dialogue to it. So maybe that's a way that we can legally still have things move forward. And, you know, there's a timing and checks and balance. But then if any of us catch something on that consent item, and all we're going to be seeing is the summary or the pro forma of what's being got approved internally, and if we pull it, that's our opportunity to say, no, we're not going to seal this deal because we have a lot of questions. I don't know, Tia, legal counsel?
That is an option. I think that doesn't mitigate the timing. It doesn't mean that you would have less meetings. It wouldn't take care of any of those issues. That means you would still have the same amount of meetings. You would still have the response, that lag in response to the developers. And so it would make the meetings go faster, but it wouldn't necessarily address the other issues. I think Eileen's point in having a more in-depth management reporting that comes to you on a regular basis that outlines those loans that have been approved and any variations to underwriting standards, so that if you wanted to call them back, and really understanding those loan approval processes and those being robust, I think that is critically important. So it's not just under a certain dollar amount. I think you guys have to be comfortable with those internal processes and the reporting that's coming to you all before you would delegate those kind of authorities.
Well, and I think Tim's comment about having that memorandum of how is the underwriting, you said it more eloquently, I think would be really important. I love it that HCD's on it, right? I think having a few more, really understanding who's on the loan committee would help, right? So that would probably give me much more comfort.
And if I may, that would be the one thing that I would like to add some additional thought to, and that is that to the extent that if we have the proper level of management reporting, then I think the responsibility has to shift back to the board to, in fact, diligently review that and make sure that that's being adhered to. I admit that I'm struggling with a dollar amount here, largely because I lack context. But as I struggle with the dollar amount, I think to myself, well, we already have delegated authority.
Yep.
So why am I hung up on whether or not that's 4, 10, 14, or 50 for that matter? The real responsibility to the board, I think, is to make sure that the processes that have been developed and put in place are appropriate, have been vetted against the potential risks to the organization, and are diligently monitored, so that if something appears that it's on the verge of jumping the rails, that somebody's prepared to stand up and jerk on the chain right then and say, time to bring it back. I am not a fan, even though I started off there. I too was a fan of the consent idea. But Tina, over the last couple of months, has convinced me that this agility that we need in terms of timing probably has to trump that, because we don't meet often enough. If we were a city council meeting every other Tuesday night, we could get away with a consent agenda. And I'm just not convinced we can at this point, because we give up a lot of the agility that we need.
I was liking the consent, but I totally understand, right? So in Fresno, when we have the time constraints, we call special board meetings, right? And we're able to bring everyone together. So I totally get the timing issue. So I totally appreciate, and you said precedence, which is true. I mean, that's why I feel a little sheepish about saying, well, wait a minute, because we have set the precedent, and now we're really talking about tweaking it. So anyways, I've enjoyed this conversation.
Yes, and thank you. I think it's
Made me nervous.
Two more things just thinking about. One is thinking that this and these projects, since I've been on the board, I don't think we've ever rejected
That is
the
true.
request for a loan, and I don't know what happens at the staff level, and so one of the things when we come back for a broader conversation, I'd be curious as to this, at the staff level, when, do you ever say no?
Yes.
And what circumstances? What do you go back and get? Like, having that would help me also understand that part of the process.
You don't see the stinky powder.
Right, yeah, exactly. So that-
But it would be good to know what percentage of,
Yeah.
right,
And-
loans that come.
And then the second comment was just maybe to address Preston's concern is some of what's interesting about this part of the process is it's where, like, you can read through all the board reports, but it's sort of fun. Oh, that's where that is.
Yeah.
There's a like
Yeah.
tangible nature
Real.
to that, and so maybe that can be satisfied in a indirect way, not a consent or policy way, but of a, here's what we funded, here's 5 photos of what we just
Yeah.
approved in the last month,
Yeah.
to give that sense of.
And maybe a part of the management reporting.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I have to say thank you very much. And this is exactly what we needed, because we've been talking about this internally. I've heard from several of you. And so I wanted to be able to have this discussion, to be responsive to the board, be responsive to staff and developers, and get some sense of how could we move this in the right direction. So we have some work cut out to do. We won't be probably coming back right away with a board action. We're going to go do our homework and our due diligence so that we can get some of this information that the board has requested. The last time there was a delegation, I think it's in the memo, was in 2001. So it's been about 17 years that, and I think that was the $4 million that was delegated to the executive director. And there was some the market reasons and wanting, to move quickly. And so times have changed over those last 17 years, but I think understanding and making sure those processes and procedures and that you all are comfortable with that would be important. So we're going to go back and do our homework.
Then two last things. One, I'm sad that I'm the only one who likes to come here and hang out with you all the time. But two, I would love, as part of that context then, has there been any default within that 17-year period of those that got approved? And you're shaking your head no, so I totally appreciate that. And there's another part of that, but it just went out of my head. Again, it's just that context of giving us context would be great. And I blew past my 11:15 promise to you all. I am sorry. But now we are on to item 6A, the strategic plan, the strategic business plan. Oh, I know what I was going to say, and I know that this might be totally untoward, but there was a time when CalHFA was in financial difficulty, right? Prior to many of us coming on the board. I guess I just have that always at the back of my mind. I don't know what happened, but just want to make sure that doesn't repeat itself. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes,
Okay.
most of that was on the single family.
I do, but, there's still approvals that happen, right? So.
Understood.
And I've been trying to be quiet.
Well, this is valid. Who's going first?
I'm going first.
Okay.
So, good morning, Chair Prince and members of the board. I'm Don Kavir, the agency's Chief Deputy Director. And this morning, my colleagues and I will be presenting the 2018-19 business plan and operating budget for your approval. I'm just going to quickly start off by walking the board through a very quick overview of our process. So, the preparation of the agency's business plan is a very deliberative process that we take very seriously. It's a living document that we use to make all the business decisions we do throughout the course of the year, and it is in part an objective measure of our success. Beginning in January, the agency's senior staff conduct several all-day business planning sessions where we evaluate mid-year results of the current year business plan, revise projections as needed, and evaluate new goals and initiatives for the coming fiscal year. Directly following the business planning sessions, each department is tasked with development of a departmental budget that is designed to be in support of the initiatives and the objectives that we state in our new business plan. And lastly, prior to finalizing the plan for submission to you here at the board, we provide the board with a workshop in which we go over our mid-year results and talk about some of the major initiatives that we've outlined as possible initiatives for the coming fiscal year and seek the board's input. So as we outlined in the board report last month, the agency is doing very well in the achievement of our business planning objectives. We have spent the last several years rebranding CalHFA, improving the agency's infrastructure, and expanding our menu of product offerings. We have streamlined our operations by improving the use of technology and by realigning staffing resources to meet the needs of our current business model, resulting in both operational efficiencies and reduced operating costs. The measure of our success can also be seen in the performance of our lending programs. Single-family lending has consistently outpaced fiscal year production and revenue goals. In fact, for the months of March and April, we've actually already revised our fiscal year-end projections. We think we may be on pace to actually surpass as much as $2 billion in lending for this fiscal year. Similarly, despite some of the headwinds that our multifamily programs have experienced, which are the rise in interest rates, the uncertainties in the tax credit market due to tax reform, and the reluctance of the new administration to continue our HUD FFB risk share program, the marketplace is still responding positively to our multifamily loan products, and the program's performance is continuing to improve. While we anticipate falling short of the current fiscal year's lending target, it is important to note that the multifamily programs is still on pace to close a 10-year high in lending activity. So in a few moments, I'm going to turn the conversation over to my two colleagues who are in charge of our two lending programs. But before I do that, I'd like to set the stage for the conversation by describing a change in our approach for setting the 2018-19 lending goals for multifamily. Unlike our single-family programs, which has real-time data regarding loan reservations and the purchases and securitizations we do on a weekly basis with our lender network, multifamily leadership has been relying on pipeline information with very little real historical data to kind of support what pull-through rates we have on those loans and really what it's going to take in terms of beginning to end to get those deals to the finish line. And so it's worth noting that lack of historical data really comes from the fact that since between, say, 2007 and 2012, we had actually zero lending activity with the exception of MHSA loan products. So I think we're sort of in an evolution trying to figure out how to gauge what that production level target should be for the year. So given that reality and the fact that the program hasn't met its business planning goal for the last 3 years, we're taking a much more conservative approach to setting the targets for 2018-19. And we want to focus on growing the program year over year without getting distracted by over-aggressive goals and targets, until at least we have more historical data to support more aggressive assumptions. Another essential theme in this year's business plan is a focus on what I'll call execution and refinement. So we have new loan products that we want to launch in our single-family space, operational improvements and innovations that we are going to tackle for the coming year. But we sort of want to refocus and focus on the refinement of the initiatives and the products that we put in place over the last 2 or 3 years. And so we're going to be kind of internal focusing to make sure that we've refined a lot of the good works that we've done. So before we jump into the business plan itself, I wanted to provide the board with a quick overview of some changes to the business planning document that's attached to your board memorandum. Specifically, we've added some new sections under the key strategy areas to distinguish new business plan items from items being carried forward from the prior fiscal year. Also, for items being carried forward, we've added a progress bar to represent a level of completion on those projects. And lastly, we've added a column that identifies projects that were anticipated to be multi-year efforts. So another significant change that I want to give you guys, which we're really excited about and we're going to hand out to you because it just came hot off the presses last night, was we've created an executive summary of the business plan that we're hoping will be a tool for both, the board members to kind of be able to explain what CalHFA is up to in the coming fiscal year, but also is in a more understandable format for the general public. So from our standpoint, the detailed document that we provide you in the board report is something that is a really good tool, I think, for the board to look at, but also for the agency's staff to utilize as sort of our roadmap. But this is what I think a great summary of what we're presenting to you here today. And as Melissa's handed that out, I want to acknowledge our Director of Marketing and our graphic designer, Elizabeth Leonard, and Kathy Phillips, our Director of Marketing, for their efforts. We didn't give them a lot of time to kind of work through this. We kind of came up with this idea, and we're like, hey, let's get this done and have it in time for the board meeting. So we hope you like it. We're interested in any feedback you have on it, but we'll be planning to bring this forward in the future as well as a part of our package.
Because I haven't seen this. This is wonderful. So let me tell you, I in talking to just staff, I asked them, have they read the business plan? And people were like, business plan? What business plan? And I said, we need something nice that just that staff could read and the outside world could read, so they just know what we're doing and know our roadmap. And yay, you guys are great. Thank you.
All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start the discussion of the agency's 2018-19 proposed business plan. The overarching goals for fiscal year 2018-19 remain relatively unchanged. We will continue to increase the agency's future income and equity position by expanding our single-family and multifamily lending activities consistent with state housing needs. Secondly, we will continue to improve operational efficiencies through the use of technology, workforce planning, and the implementation of best practices. Third, we will collaborate with other housing entities and stakeholders to deliver effective and innovative housing solutions. And fourth, we're going to ensure that all of the funds awarded to CalHFA under the Treasury's hardest hit program are properly deployed to help prevent foreclosures for eligible homeowners who have financial hardship. This last goal, which we'll talk some more about later, is going to sunset over the next fiscal year as the Keep Your Home California program winds down operations and expends the last of the funding allocation it was given by Treasury. So starting with goal one, I'm going to turn the conversation over to our Director of Homeownership, Tim Sue, and then he will be followed by Michael Carroll as we walk through the program initiatives for 2018-19.
Good morning. First, I'd like to say to President that we don't do our single-family lending the same way that we did 10 years ago. There is a lot of conversations out there about where we are today and how it compares to the last peak. We don't own any of the real estate risk on the single-family originations that we do. As we talked about before, the loans are sold to the GSEs, and we don't retain the real estate risk. So if, God forbid, something bad were to happen similar to last time, we wouldn't have the same kind of pressure on the agency's financials and balance sheet like last time. So we have talked about this in various forums that we definitely took away lessons learned from that, and on the single-family side, we are doing things very, very differently. It's a whole different piece of puzzle that we put together to do our lending. In that light,
I got the sharp elbow already, but now I appreciate I got the other elbow from you.
And I did want to also say that we love and respect all our board members the same, no matter if they're here sitting in your seat or if they're just a mere participating as a board member. Our target for single family this year is the same as last year, as $1.5 billion. In terms of the actual loan count that we're targeting, this is likely to be a little bit fewer loans than last year. It's instead of 6,000 loans, it would be closer to about 5,600 loans. And this is in part because the average loan sizes are actually creeping up. Last year, we assumed about $250,000 is the average loan size. And over this fiscal year, we have noticed that is creeping up to closer to about 265 or so. And it's quite possible that going into the next fiscal year, that'll continue to creep up. And of course, that has to deal with a lot of the issues that you talk about we talk about, like affordability and housing shortage in housing inventory and things like that. So the average loan size, in some sense, is a manifestation of that. We feel that it is prudent, I think, to be conservative in this particular targeting for a variety of reasons. As you all know, that interest rates have increased by a lot in the last 3 to 4 months. The mortgage rates today are significantly higher than they were in the fourth quarter of last year. And not just higher, but the interest rate volatility is also higher. And that's actually creating a variety of things that we don't typically think about. For example, we are noticing that the product mix that we are originating is very different than it was, let's say, 9 months ago. We're actually doing more conventional loans than FHA loans. And we're also noticing that with a higher interest rate environment, it's harder for people to finance, let's say, closing costs. And last but not least, I think I mentioned to the board in April that 60% of the purchase market last year actually came from first-time home buyers. And the mix of purchase and refinancing market shares are also shifting dramatically, meaning that with higher rates, there are actually fewer refinancing opportunities for lenders to chase down. And that's actually manifesting in a different way, that we're starting to deal with lenders being consolidated or being purchased out or closing down operations. I was just actually in conversations with my staff this morning about someone that we just learned about yesterday that's getting bought out. But much like lessons learned on our side, some of these transactions, lessons learned on their side, they're kind of doing these transactions in which they're finding ways to be creative, if you will, about some of the legacy reps and warrants, which creates issues for us because we are kind of counting on these lenders to be around to honor the reps and warrants if there's any defects in the loan origination. So anyway, so we can see and feel the repercussions of these higher rates and higher volatility interest rates, and all those things are part of reasons why we think that it's prudent to be conservative. $1.5 billion is still a lot, and we do worry about other things, such as capacity in terms of operation and also the amount of down payment assistance funds that we have. Those are all things that come into play for us to manage the amount of productions we do in this coming year. This chart is a summary of, in many sense, some of the things that we talked about in the last board meeting. It simply shows that in terms of where we are this fiscal year and how we track against the target that was approved by the board last year, we're doing quite well. You can see here that what we're proposing for this coming year seems to be lower than what we're tracking to do this fiscal year. But again, I'm hoping that some of the things I've expressed in terms of caution is the explanation that the board can sort of consider in terms of what we're targeting for next year.
So I just want to interject something really quick based on something I said earlier, which is that the revised 17-18 projections that you're seeing here, we kept the consistency with the mid-year report that you received last month, but my point was that in March and April, the demand, and I think Tim maybe can speak to it a little bit, which is that part of the rise in interest rates we feel has pushed demand forward to us, so that we're seeing sort of a spike right now as people are fearful that rates will keep rising and they're going to then want to get their transaction done sooner than later. And so we think we're seeing that, and that's partly why we think we're likely to even exceed the 1.7 billion.
So I actually like this chart a lot. What this chart is showing is our actual production and how it tracks against the business plan targets over the last 4 years or so. And you can see that while the gap is happy news, it's actually good from planning point of view for us to track actual and targeting closer. And you can see that in 2016 and 17, we had a huge gap in terms of what we actually did versus what we targeted. And then what Don is referring to is that for this fiscal year, which is the 17-18, our target was $1.5 billion, but it's quite likely this $1.7 billion is our projected number from the April presentation. And March and April, on days in which rates went up versus let's say yesterday, we would get like 60, 70 loans in a day. Meaning that when rates go up, people go out and sort of figure things out and reserve a loan. It's really counterintuitive, but this kind of behavior happens in other things like
Well, and to give another context, when I first got here, I think we considered like 20-something loans a day was considered excellent. And so getting 70 a day or 50 a day is a significant increase.
So as a result, both March and April were, again, in this hot, elevated interest rate environment, both March and April were our record. We had two sequential record reservation months in March and April. I believe in April, we reserved for the month of April very close to 1,000 loans. While we can use this as an opportunity to sort of project that things are going to go as well as they did in the last 2 months, the cautious side of me is echoing what Don is saying, that with this kind of elevated activity, I wonder if we were going to hit some sort of air pocket beyond this. But it's simply a context for caution. And again, if we do $1.5 billion, that's a decent number given our operation size and everything. And this is a chart that I had presented to the board back in April. This is simply a summary. I like this summary as sort of like a one-pager of, on the top of this chart is all the things that we have added in terms of loan products and clientele in this particular fiscal year. So as you know, what we like to do is meet our business goal targets, but always, we're always trying to expand our loan products and our clientele. On the lower part of this chart are things that are to come. So I think that the board might remember that in February, the board allowed us to use some of our down payments assistance to help the disaster victims. So we are very close to launching that. And we have also talked to the board about later this year also expanding our lending to the Indian reservations, which is a topic that has a lot of stakeholders around that issue as well. And refinancing. And Fannie Mae has a lot of conversations around expanding their clientele as well under their duty to serve mandates. And as they add loan products under their duty to serve, for example, a conventional manufactured housing product, we'll probably add them as well. And manufactured housing is something that I think that we hear a lot about. And the board shows here that we added that back in October 2017. So we have had that for about 4 or 5 months or so. And in just that short period, we've closed about 60 manufactured housing for FHA loans. So that is definitely a product that is relevant for our clientele in that income spectrum that we're addressing. And we're going to do that. We're going to add the manufactured housing on the conventional side before the year is out as well.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So multifamily's contribution to Goal 1 includes $415 million in projected production and $12 million in revenue. This is a goal that is less than the current year goal, actually, and I think Don set the stage a little bit about why we are taking that approach, and I'll get into that with later slides. We also have a number of initiatives that we're going to either continue or start, including the naturally occurring affordable housing. rural activity and partnerships with local governments and CDFIs. Probably our biggest initiative will be design and implementation of the new program created by SB2 for the missing middle. So to get into the production goals, this year we decided to kind of right-size the goals in terms of, and the next, when I get to the next page, we'll show you graphically. But for now, we looked at this year's goal of $530 million, and then as of May, actually, where we really think we're going to be, closer to $380 million. As we look back over our goals and versus production over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been pretty optimistic at most times and failed to really hit those optimistic targets. So this year we're kind of basing our future projection on the end of this year and a modest increase, overall about 9%. It varies by program, and the revenue actually increases more than that, primarily because of the lending mix of products that we will expect to do. So if we look at the next slide, you can see for our first lien lending, our primary first lien lending, over the years since 2014-15, where we've set the goal and where we've actually arrived in terms of production. So as we approach the end of this year, we're at $140 million on a $200 million goal. So we ratcheted down a bit to $150 million for next year. We certainly hope that we beat that goal, but we want to be realistic in terms of our historic growth. And as you can see, we have been steadily growing the lending over the last few years, just not at the optimistic rate that we had hoped. The conduit business, on the other hand, has grown tremendously, but it also, we had a dip this year due to circumstances, but it was also we were able to achieve the goals set for that program closer than we had been on the direct lending program. But we are going to, failing to hit the $300 million goal this year, we're setting it at $250 million for the coming year, which would be an 11% increase over our projections for this year end. As we look at that production and what it consists of, we've currently got about $410 million in the pipeline over a 2-year period. And the composition of that is where we want it to be in terms of most of the business would be in permanent takeout. We'll be doing some acquisition rehab for those projects that absolutely require it. And then the $20 million is currently projected in portfolio refinance, which is a drop from what we're doing this year, but we really expect to grow the permanent takeout business. So we do expect to close that $150 to $160 million next year. The conduit pipeline, we've got over 18-month period, a $300 million pipeline easily, but our goal for the year allows for some fallout, which always happens. Our MHSA program, we had projected $30 million for this year, and we're going to hit about 15. And that program is very dependent on the way local governments roll out the money and make it available for participants. And they just haven't been moving the money out as quickly as we had hoped in our earlier projections. So we're going to stick with the $15 million estimate there. As far as initiatives, as I mentioned, the largest, and highest profile will be design and rollout of the Missing Middle program funded by SB2 dollars. We've begun this month actually a series of listening sessions to talk to developers, local governments, and CDFI partners on just how we can most efficiently use those proceeds. We're expecting about $30 to $35 million a year beginning about this time next year. The money should be available to us. We're in consulting with HCD. It seems like the early estimates for The revenue raised by the program are pretty much on target. So HCD is receiving the bulk of the funding this year, and they're seeing that the rest of the estimates are pretty good. So we're feeling good about a $30 to $35 million funding availability next year. The other thing we want to do is, just as FFB is going away, we want to increase our toolbox of products that we can offer to developers so that we're not a one-trick pony, that, loss of one program or product doesn't severely impact us. So we have been working with the Federal Home Loan Bank, and we want to kind of mirror what single family has done in terms of being able to leverage our assets, our multifamily assets, to use the Federal Home Loan Bank for capital. Freddie Mac, we've begun discussions on origination program with them. Fannie and Freddie are very good friends on the single family side, and we want to see how we can get them to the table on the multifamily side. So that's something in the works. Another product that we've actually asked HUD for permission to offer under the risk share program, a 35-year, 17-year 35-year term, 17-year product that we can lower pricing on some projects. It's not something we'd offer across the board to all projects. It'd have to be strong projects, good developers, but I think we can offer some significant cost savings for those good projects. We also want to increase our rural presence and our footprint. Part of the proceeds of SB2 could help us enhance our small loan program, so we want to focus on that. Fannie and Freddie also have significant rural targets with their duty to serve, and we're going to hope to leverage that and get them to the table, as I mentioned earlier, on the multifamily side. We'll be doing increased outreach to rural developers. I think part of the issue here is that just lack of familiarity with our programs and products on the rural side. On our asset management team, we're going to look at continued efficiencies. You all recall that we had an internal study done by consultant Ben Frank. He's going to return in the summer to take a look at where how we've implemented the realignment of the program, and kind of a phase 2 of that realignment will be increased emphasis on how we can leverage sharing, monitoring, and inspection with local and other state partners, and then also doing cost-benefit analysis of the kind of review and oversight we do on our loans, and see if we can gain some efficiencies from that angle. We are going to continue to grow our local partnerships with local government. Just last week, Los Angeles City Council approved a joint program where they're going to put in local dollars for a NOAA program, where CalHFA and the City of Los Angeles will co-equally provide subsidy, and will provide the hard debt for naturally occurring affordable housing projects. A local CDFI, the New Generation Fund, is also part of that program. So that piece enables developers to access the CDFI for quick takedown of properties and take them off the market while they work through Los Angeles and our programs for the permanent funding on those. We also want to continue work on trying to maximize the use of surplus land at the state and local level for affordable housing. This year we've been consulting with the Department of General Services on 2 properties, one in San Francisco and one in Costa Mesa, and providing consulting on how they can leverage that resource at the state level through local governments and make it available for affordable housing. So we want to continue that effort. And that's it for multifamily.
So because Larry had the death in his family, Tim's going to go ahead and take care of Larry's part of the presentation.
Just can't get rid of me. As you know, this is now under Larry Flood's leadership. the goal of the financing area is to continue, to Preston's point earlier, to continue to stabilize and strengthen our financials and the balance sheet, and also to find ways to extract more value out of our loan production. And some of the things that are sort of in the final stages of that process, we do have one letter of credit that supports some variable rate bonds in our single-family indenture that I believe the documents are all in escrow and it's closing tomorrow. And you might recall that in the depth of the crisis, we had $3.5 billion of reliance on the bank's letter of credit. I think as of May 1st, that was $129 million. And I fully expect us to be south of $100 million by the end of this calendar year. And I don't see us having any of these facilities much longer than sometime next year. The record should show that I got a big thumbs up from Mr. Schaefer.
I heard knocking on wood. Was it thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Was that for Tim or for Larry?
Both.
And I think that is something that, as the board knows, and we have had your support in terms of deleveraging that side of the balance sheet for a long time. And we'll come back to, and the next slide sort of shows what we plan on doing, and we ask the board's continued support in terms of deleveraging that. But it is definitely in sort of the final chapters of that story. And we used to be relying on what I call a rainbow coalition of banks who support that $3.5 billion of facilities. With just about 100 and change left, we're now only down to about 3 banks, and each of them having about $30 million or so. So it's definitely a much more relaxed in terms of financial stress on the agency. The other item here is that we're continuing to work with Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco. This is something that Michael talked about earlier, in which we're trying to work with them to assess some of our seasoned multifamily loans as collateral to be used on this credit facilities that we have with them. And this is a slide that I have shown the board in the past about the unencumbered cash by our bond indentures and what we do with that cash. And we show this for a variety of reasons. One is that as the board passes, let's say, certain resolutions, so as the board knows that every March we request the board's action to pass bond financing resolutions and non-bond financing resolutions. And in there, it actually has a certain allocation of the agency's resources for certain activities. So for example, when we talk about things like 710, we talk about warehousing multifamily loans, all those things, as it turns out, add up to much bigger numbers than you think. So on the slide here, what it shows is that we have about $75 million set aside for warehousing multifamily loans. And that's in the multifamily non-bond financing resolution. And we have warehousing needs on the single-family side, in addition to, for example, things like 710 or let's say ADUs. We have $25 million set aside for that. And we also have, we pre-fund our operating costs. I think that, which Don will get to later on in the presentation. I think that we're a little bit less than $40 million, but for the sake of this chart, we're showing $40 million. And last but not least, as I mentioned, I think the board has been very supportive in using some of the resources that we have to continue to leverage our balance sheet. As I mentioned, we have about $130 million of these letter of credits left inside these indentures. And what we're doing here is setting aside about $30 million of that cash that we have to help us wind down sort of the tail end of these letter of credits. Otherwise, it's quite possible that they have a long tail, in part because these are all backed by mortgages, which could take a long time to prepay. So the final plan is to use some of that $30 million to help us as I mentioned, wind down these letter of credits so that we could be talking about, as Tim mentioned, something to the nature of like getting rid of all these VRDOs and these letter of credits in the next 18 months or so.
So under Goal 2, which is really focused on improving operational efficiencies through the use of technology and workforce planning. Key action items for the coming fiscal year include implementing Phase 3 of the agency's financial system upgrade, which includes deploying accounts receivable module, inventory control module, and additional tools for automating transactional allocations. That when they're processing journal entries, it's going to automate process transactional splits and kind of reduce the manual activities that are going on there. We're also going to be exploring third-party software interfaces to enhance reporting and further streamline the various business processes. Additionally, we intend to leverage off of our successes this year where we developed and implemented electronic workflow activities that impacted our human resource, fiscal services, and asset management divisions. In that case, we created a bunch of electronic workflows that basically took what was once very manual, very paper-intensive processes and made it very seamless, in which you would initiate, for instance, a contract, and all the initial aspects of that process or the phase of that process would go through email approvals, and you have documents attached, and then it ends up in many cases where we've got documents now that are stored with the transaction for the purposes of looking things up. And fiscal services has also done a variety of things where transactions, accounts payable, and the like are now the supporting documents are embedded in the transactions within the GL itself, so that staff can drill down on those documents if they need to research things. You're not going to file drawers. You're not doing a lot of those things that were previously a requirement. Let's see. I just mentioned that we've successfully automated the initial stages of the contracts and procurements process, and we intend to create electronic workflows for the remaining stages of the contract and procurement process so that it's automated beginning to end, and that's sort of our goal for 2018-19. Similarly, another example of our efforts to gain efficiencies through technology is the legal department's implementation of a software system that will standardize the preparation of multifamily lending documents to improve the consistency and speed at which transactional documents can be completed. Legal is committed to having the software operational by the end of June, I believe, and we intend to expand its use into other areas, including contracts, so that contracts can, in theory, have boilerplate language where people that need to create a contract can go in and utilize that rather than the more paper-intensive and labor-intensive process we have right now. Another major initiative for 2018-19 is the implementation of a new multifamily loan servicing system, which will reduce cost, improve reporting, and streamline our processes. Additionally, we are committed to researching and identifying the best opportunities to procure new systems for our multifamily loan origination and asset management activities. So we're pretty sure we've got a system identified to deal with servicing that's going to be a real benefit to us, but we're still in search for what's going to work best for CalHFA on the origination side as well as the asset management side of our activities. And lastly, we intend to fill our senior management vacancies, including General Counsel, Director of Legislation, and the Director of Business and Governmental Affairs positions, to strengthen our executive team and create more bandwidth within the organization. Let's see, for 2018-19, as it relates to continuing to monitor and employ long-term strategies to mitigate enterprise risks, our enterprise risk management staff are going to be continuing to fulfill their requirements under our annual reporting requirements for the State Leadership and Accountability Act, which requires the agency to continuously evaluate enterprise level risks and then identify the controls or the controls that are either going to prevent or detect those risks and then contain them. And additionally, they're also working to sort of refine some of their department scopes related to the quality control activities and developing the management reporting of those activities so that senior management gets the level of reporting about what's going on in terms of the QC activities that they're doing. Also, ERM staff will continue to partner with multifamily and asset management programs to ensure that the recently developed underwriting standards and procedures are being effectively implemented, and that the broader effort to identify and improve technology that I just previously mentioned is deployed in a way that has the proper controls and the proper reporting that we're going to need on the back end. Let's see. CalHFA continues to work collaboratively with our state and federal housing partners, as well as other housing entities and stakeholders, to promote affordable housing solutions in California. And we participate in the Veterans Housing and Homeless Prevention Program, and in partnership with HCD, we administer the HUD Section 811 Project Rental Assistance Program. CalHFA obviously also serves on the CIDLAC board, as well as TCAC board. And we also have a seat on the Homeless Coordinating and Financing Council. Furthermore, members of our executive team sit on several advisory committees for financial institutions, including Fannie Mae and several other nonprofit associations. For 2018-19, we intend to work with our partners to develop a more formal process to share performance and compliance data, which is what I think Michael touched on in his presentation, to where we can share data on the performance of our loans, where we all have some stake in that loan. And that about rounds this out. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next section of Tony Sertich, our Director of Enterprise Risk Management, who is also managing our Keep Your Home California program, and he's going to brief the board on the goals for 2018-19.
Thank you, and good afternoon now. I'm sorry, Preston. As was mentioned earlier, the Keep Your Home California program is in wind down mode. As you'll see as I walk through the presentation, we are running out of funds that were provided to us from Treasury. And so our main goal this year is to effectively wind down the program. And if we go to the next page, I'll walk a little bit through the program results. Oops. What we have done as of April 30th, 2018, we've helped over 81,000 households, and that's with over $2 billion in assistance provided. 95% of the available funds have been provided through our four programs, or our five programs, I'm sorry, one of which is now closed. California's provided more than twice as much assistance as any other state. And this economic impact as of end of 2016 was $3 billion. We think it's closer to $4 billion today because it's about a 2-to-1 ratio that we've seen in the 2 times that we've had a professor come in and analyze the impact that we've had on the California economy. So for every dollar we give away, it has a $2 impact on the economy. So we think that's a very powerful sign for everybody involved with the program. So the main goal for the Keep Your Home program during the wind down is to ensure that we get all of the money out that we can to homeowners, but do it within the allotted administrative budget that U.S. Treasury provided to us. And at this point, we're well on pace to do both of those things. The next page has a more detailed numbers on the 5 programs that we've run. I know there's acronyms here, which I will explain briefly. The first one is the Unemployment Mortgage Assistance Program, UMA. That's the largest program that we run. Almost 60,000 homeowners have benefited from that. If you're unemployed and you need assistance paying your mortgage, we provide that assistance. You will also note that we've allocated over 100% of the funds from this program. While that is true, about $80 million of that is being held because it's paid out over 18 months. So not all of that $80 million ultimately will be provided because the homeowner hopefully will become reemployed during that time period and won't need all of the funds that were allocated to them. The second program is the Mortgage Reinstatement Assistance Program. That is just to get homeowners current on their mortgages if they fall behind, once they get reemployed or get in a better financial position. and are able to pay their mortgage going forward. The third program, which, well, fewer homeowners were affected by it, but the dollar amounts are up there near the top, is the principal reduction program. Homeowners that need help on their, to reduce their principal on their mortgage. Oftentimes that goes hand in hand with the other programs that we offer, just to help them get to a more affordable, long-term, sustainable payment. The last two programs that we've had are small programs. The fourth one is the Transition Assistance Program. It's really a cash for keys type program. So if there was nothing else we could do to keep someone in their home, we would help pay for them for moving expenses to help relocate to a new place. And the final program was our Reverse Mortgage Assistance Program, another small program that is now closed, no longer taking new applications. And that was to help those that were in a reverse mortgage to pay for back taxes or insurance or other costs associated with living in their home. So now on the effective wind down of the program, the assumptions, as I said, that we're working with is that we're going to provide over 100% of the hardest hit funds program and not exceed our administrative budget. The way we can provide more than 100% of our funds that were allocated is because we have received money back from homeowners who received assistance, but later were able to sell their home at a profit, or otherwise were able to recollect on their lien. So at this point, we've received about $90 million in lien repayments that will be used as a buffer to make sure that we can go in excess of our 100% allocation from Treasury without being on the hook for funds that we don't have available. We've announced just last week that our final applications will be taken on June 29th. And all four of our first mortgage programs will continue to be available until that date. Our fundings won't necessarily be closed at that date. Our applications will. It could take up to 3 months to fund those applications. So we have our central processing center down in Riverside. It's our call center, our application processing center, our funding center. They will remain open for several months after the last application date. The current expectation is October, November. After that closes, CalHFA MAC and CalHFA will operate all of the Keep Your Home California issues, processing, whatever needs to be done, will be done out of our Sacramento office. The last page has a little more detailed timeline of this wind down. As I said last week, we gave notice to staff and business partners last week and this week of the wind down and the timing. June 29th, the last homeowner action plan. Another thing that is going along with this is the staff that we have down at the Central Processing Center. We will have reductions in force. We've noticed that. The first one's going to be on July 2nd, and that will continue for the 4 months after that as well. The final disbursement should be the third quarter. Oh, excuse me. Yes.
How many staff are we talking about?
There's about a little over 200 staff there, but there's about 150 to 175 permanent staff that are being reduced.
And I have a follow-up. Are these represented employees?
No, they're contract employees.
Okay.
They're not state employees, I should be clear.
Got it.
It was a
Thank you.
contract with a third party
Great.
that
Okay.
is handling the layoff.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Don. So the third quarter, we will have the final disbursements on the cash. The fourth quarter, we have the end of our Springboard agreement, which is the contractor that is the employer for this the Central Processing Center. And once that Springboard agreement ends, operations will be run through CalHFA MAC back up in Sacramento. Now, because the Unemployment Mortgage Assistance Program has an 18-month disbursement, we won't finish those disbursements until about the first quarter of 2020. So there will be a long month-to-month disbursement of the unemployment benefits. And so at the second quarter of 2020, we will end the program officially, completely. And any money remaining in the program will be swept back to U.S. Treasury. And that includes any repayments, lien releases that we've gotten. Any lien repayments we get after the sweep will be administered by CalHFA. And another part of our plan that we're working on is what to do with any lien releases and repayments that we get after the 2020 date. How we're gonna, what program and how we're gonna set that up. Something we're working on as a CalHFA executive team. Are there any other questions about the ramp down?
So if it's winding down in 2020, are we gonna try to reinvent it and have something in place for?
I wish that was possible, and maybe it is, but we did have $2 billion, over $2 billion that we received from the federal government for this program. What we're experiencing now, so some people have said to me, well, it's good timing because there's no need for this anymore, you know, foreclosures are down and the economy's back up. But our applications are still coming in at the same pace that they always have. So we know there's still a need for this program. The problem is there's really no financing for the program. If we had another $500 million, $1 billion, we might be able to do something with it. But at this point, we haven't found a replacement for those funds.
Are we gonna try to pursue that? I mean, I just think that, I mean, it's there. I think once it goes away, I mean, that's a bad. And, you know, life happens, people's jobs change, and I think, you know, we don't want another recession, but it's nice to know that there is something out there, and there should be a way we should figure out, or at least explore some form of preservation of this program. I don't know.
I don't know how successful we'll be with the federal administration in getting another $2 billion.
That's true.
And to be clear, this wasn't just a California program, this was a national
Right,
program.
right.
And we just received a large chunk of it, but, you know, it was just a pro rata share of.
No, the state of
the
California
funds.
is looking
Yeah.
good with the surplus, right?
Mr. Schaefer?
Why they all look at me? A point of clarification, Tony, that after the repatriation of the remaining funds to Treasury, anything beyond that date is subject to the discretion of the HFA, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's no clawback we have beyond that date?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're still 2 years out from that time.
Tony, I know you mentioned this in our meeting, but I think it might be helpful for the board members to hear about those wonderful Keep Your Home California commercials and what the plan is around that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as part of the wind down, we're sort of treating everything business as usual until June 29th. So you will continue to see the commercials on TV. They're not changing. It's very expensive to change TV commercials, which is why we've had the same ones out there for a couple years now. We also do a lot of radio advertising and online advertising. Those are changing slightly. We may not blast the date out there, but we will say, hey, funds are limited, come get your money now. If you're eligible, apply today. The reason we're not blasting out the date everywhere in broad brush is because we're concerned about a spike in reservations at the end, and with the timing of everything winding down, as staff are leaving, we can't handle necessarily a huge spike, especially if the volume is, what we've heard from other states who have already gone through this process is a lot of the volume that comes in at the end is just people throwing stuff out there and seeing if they get money. It's not necessarily people that are qualified, so it's just a lot of work to say, hey, you're not fully qualified. We do have several counseling agents, homeowner counseling agencies that we work with. We've notified them of the date, so they're out there. Homeowners that they're engaged with, they will be able to let them know and get their applications in at an appropriate time, as well as our servicing partners. So the servicers who know that they have issues with homeowners, they also know about the timing and will work through their portfolio to get ones in that they think will qualify. Thanks, Tina. And I want to thank, I want to thank Tina for being on our CalHFA MAC board as well.
I'm going to miss my job.
Tina and Delilah are two of the board members that sit on our CalHFA MAC board as well, so, as well as Tim.
So that concludes our presentation on the business plan. Are there any questions the board has on the business plan before I move to the budget?
I have a couple quick questions, mostly for Tim. First, the mandatory solar, is that something that we have a product to serve that is just coming out of new homes in California requiring solar? I don't know if it's like a $10,000 cost. I don't know the state of it. I thought it was adopted, but I'm.
Yesterday.
By the
Yeah.
PUC, yeah.
We don't actually serve a lot of new construction. Most of our business is resale. But having said that, there's no, to the degree that someone finds a new construction with the new solar panels and they can meet our income and purchase price limits, there's no reason why they can't use it.
Okay, just asking that. And then second thing was, you mentioned the exposure to the lenders consolidating. What is that, in terms of our in terms of our pipelines, are these brokers that are out there bringing us loans and there's consolidation among them? Like, what's the exposure or what's the risk on that stuff?
I think I told you there's no risk, right? No, that's not true. So what we don't have is that we don't have the real estate risks on the first loans, right? So suppose that we have a lender that made a first loan, and they're also, on our behalf, making a down payment assistance loan and a closing cost assistance loan. So there are times in which we get a loan that has an early default, and then we go in there and we look at that loan and we discover, oh, there's something defective about the underwriting. That's when there's a demand for repurchase. The demand for repurchase is coming in from our servicer. So again, we're not on the real estate risk of that first lien loan, but the subordinate loans are owned by CalHFA. So then we would also go in and say we demand a repurchase of the subordinate loans. If they are trying to jettison their old legacy reps and warrants, they're kind of throwing their hands up and say, well, we got rid of those legacy reps and warrants as part of this merger or consolidation. What we're trying to devise right now is different ways to also work with them so that they do honor these old repurchase demands. And in large part, that could mean that, well, they can do, let's say the purchasing entity cannot do new business with us, for example. And in an environment in which there is less refinancing activities and more focus on purchase activities, and as I mentioned, and then of that purchase activity, last year some 60% of that is first-time home buyer. Strangely, and this is something that Don has talked about in our business planning, is that strangely, we do have a growing leverage in a consolidating environment. So it's those kind of loans I'm talking about.
And my question was a little different, but thank you, that was helpful to understand that. But my question is, to the extent that we have our source, we're upstream from the folks sourcing loans for us, essentially, that we're purchasing from, and those guys consolidate, do we have risk in terms of our pipeline of new loans coming in?
Yes, I mean, I think that part of our success is that we have now about 110 or 20 approved lenders, and to the degree that these activities are diminishing our team of lenders, it's quite possible that that would mean that our reach is diminished. That's possible.
Not a big concern. Okay. And then I had one other question on the multifamily side, just for Michael, on the local partnerships. That was one thing that I know, that came up at a board meeting last year where there was some pushback from the local entities on the conduit issuance, and so I'm just curious, I know you mentioned you're expanding your outreach and that stuff. I'm just curious about like what you're doing, how you're doing, and how's that going?
Yeah, so to use LA as an example again, we are working with them, apart from the NOAA program I described. They approached us about us doing the conduit issuance for smaller deals, $15 million and under. And we have a good draft MOU, and we're hoping that that will get approved at the local level fairly soon. We have a process for whenever we get a conduit issuance request where we consult with the local government. And if we have a lending component to the conduit issuance, then we have to do the conduit issuance. But if it's a conduit only, we consult with them and try to cooperate with them if they want to do the issuance. We I guess by right could do it anywhere we want, but we're really trying to engender a partnership, and it really varies case by case.
Anyone else? I think, are you moving on now to the budget?
I was going to, I just wanted to see if the board wanted to take action on the business plan or just finish
Oh.
out the budget.
It's your discretion. You can do it together, or you can take
It's up to you.
They're two separate resolutions.
If I can make a suggestion, I actually have another commitment, so if we could take action now, that would be ideal.
Well, we have two action items still on our agenda. I think the one's in the other, right?
Yeah,
The
we have
budget.
we have the business plan and the operating budget. So the operating budget's the next piece. I'll move quick.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll hang on.
Do you just want me to keep going?
Yes.
Quickly.
All right. So with the business
No
plan.
more jabs from Tim at me.
What's that? All right. So with this business plan in mind, we've developed our operating budget for 2018-19 in support of all of the initiatives and action items that we've laid out for you today. The next chart reflects the resources that we believe we anticipate having to support our budget for 2018-19. The resources are generated primarily from loan origination fees, loan repayments, and interest income. For fiscal year 2018-19, we expect to receive approximately $71.9 million to cover the costs of operations. While the agency still has reliance on legacy resources to cover operating costs, the continued growth of our lending programs, especially single-family, has significantly improved this issue. And fee income from our single-family lending programs has grown quickly, as we showed you earlier, and multifamily is continuing to improve year over year, so that gap is narrowed. And I think we talked last year about this time that current operating costs were being covered by about 85% of current operating costs were being covered by our current year lending activities and/or what we'll consider new era income that we've generated since probably 2014-15. So that's how we've been trying to monitor how we're doing at narrowing that gap of living off of legacy resources. As you can see from the chart, we are recommending adoption of a $39.7 million operating budget, of which $28.3 million will be used for personal services and $11.3 million for operating expenses and equipment. Resources for the fiscal year are expected to exceed operating costs by $32.2 million, and those surplus funds will be used to support future lending activities and operating costs of the agency. The proposed operating budget represents an $833,000 or 2% decrease in appropriations compared with the prior year. The decrease in annual appropriations primarily represents the net impact of expense reductions in salary and benefits and consulting and professional services. Specifically, the agency has reduced salary and benefit costs by eliminating 20 full-time equivalent vacant positions and about 0.7 temporary help positions. And don't ask me how do we get to those decimals on full-time headcount. The salary and benefit savings from these reductions were partially offset by employee general salary increases that were approved by CalHFA throughout the year, and also by the GSIs that I believe are anticipated in the month of July. And really, it's not just those GSIs, it's the ever-increasing costs of employee pensions, as well as OPEB and healthcare costs that all of the state agencies are being impacted by. The reduction in funded vacancies has helped hold salary and benefit costs relatively static. If we're looking at us year over year, we're a little bit down, but we've been able to do quite well given those rising costs. And additionally, the use of technology and the implementation of various process improvements, combined with the staffing realignments that I mentioned earlier in our loan servicing, single-family, and asset management divisions, has increased the operational capacity of the agency to meet our existing business needs. Consulting and professional services have also decreased 13% due to departmental realignments, which have allowed for the elimination of unneeded third-party contracts, where some of the activities we were doing and the way we were doing them, we were actually employing third-party contractors to assist us, and we've been able to realign staff in a way that they can do some of those functions, and we're not now relying on contracts. Finally, it is also worth noting that, and I think I just did, that despite all these rising costs, which, PERS, I think, is projected to continue to decrease, if you will, its discount rate and increase the employer-paid portion contributions, that we're not going to be able to do this forever, and that's not our intent. Our intent is to sort of right-size ourselves and become as efficient as possible. But I think as those things continue to grow, our operating budget is likely to continue to grow as well. But we're doing what we can while we can. Finally, it also, going to the last slide, this just, for fiscal year 2018-19, the agency is proposing that authorized full-time equivalent positions be reduced from 254.9 to 234.2, which is 231 regular positions and 3.2 temporary positions. This is a net reduction of about 20.7 positions compared with the prior year. And I would just note that since 2011-12, we've reduced our full-time positions by 33% here at CalHFA, and we're doing, I think when you look at that same time period, we're doing a whole lot more lending and done a lot more activity, and we're doing it with a much more streamlined and focused effort. While these staffing reductions reflect strategic efforts to streamline and right-size the organization, we're cognizant of the need to attract, develop, and retain staff to deliver on our goals and to facilitate succession planning for the future. And we always have that in mind as we're making these decisions. So we're not just all about how we're going to trim and cut. We are thinking about all those things. But a lot of times you have to do, when you're doing one, it's not that you're not thinking about the other. So with that, that concludes my remarks. And
You had a comment, a question?
Just a quick question. On the salary benefit side, I know that FTE chart helps a lot. Currently, what's the share of the salary benefit line that's current salaries versus
the share of it that's what?
pension benefits versus, what?
I would say it's
percentage
7 to 8%. 7 to 8%.
All right, so we have two motions agendized, and so I think I'd like to, if we can take one motion, then the other, and we'll do questions when we get to the motions. Are you fair? Okay
And
with that?
can I interject one thing before you move? Is there was a small change that was on a slide. I don't know if we can go backwards on that, on the multifamily slides. There was a change to one of the revenue projections, and I want to make sure that that change gets incorporated into your motion. Keep going back.
Was that the change in the
One with the little
MHSA?
arrow down in the bottom right-hand corner, Don.
Yeah, it was the one in the bottom right-hand corner. We had your board report and the attachment have the wrong number in it, and so I want to make sure that it's reflected to be changed.
Okay, so,
There.
is that?
So this one, we
Right.
would like the action to at least acknowledge the change in revenue expectation for the special needs housing program to be 1.3 million.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to adopt resolution 1821, authorizing the agency business plan for fiscal year 2018-2019 that includes the change for special needs housing projections proposed.
So moved.
We have-
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there a question on the business plan by anyone? Any comment? Hearing none, I think we can go for a vote on it.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Resolution, Resolution 1821 is approved.
Great. And I know you have a question, so how about if we take a motion on 1822, resolution authorizing the agency operating budget for fiscal year 2018-2019?
I'd make that motion as well.
Second.
And there's a second. Now, did you have a question?
No, I just have an observation. I
Great.
think if you look at the present, let me back up. I'll be brief. I think the agency has made incredibly good moves in the last half dozen years. That's reflected in surpluses that are restoring health to the statement in that position that I find very encouraging. This is a de-risk organization. Congratulations, well done. However, that last discussion that presents budget items for a period of 6 years, taken out of context, I think puts the agency at some risk that somebody will say, seem to be operating at very large surpluses. And without the follow-on conversation that says, yes, that's correct, but it's restoring balance sheet health, I think you don't want to invite that argument. The whole point of this is that it has to be put into that context. That's the only observation I would make.
And one of the reasons we started presenting the business plan along with the budget is so that you would get that whole context, because in the past, it hadn't been done that way. And we also present revenue projections along with expenses, because it hadn't been done that way. And so,
And Tia, I take that point, and I get that. One of the things that always makes me anxious about this kind of thing is not what goes on inside this room, it's what goes on outside this room, and that's the only thing I was expressing my anxiety about.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote.
Ms. Avila Farias?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher?
Yes.
Ms. Johnson Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Prince?
Yes.
Resolution 18-22 is approved.
The reports have been provided. Are there any comments or questions about either the homeownership loan portfolio update or the legislative report? I know that you did send out something from the Low Income Housing Coalition yesterday. I don't know if there's anything else. Any other questions? Discussion of other matters by the board? Other board matters? Public testimony, any discussion of any, only of the other matters to be brought to the board's attention? Not on the agenda. See no one out there. It's all our friends. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I'm only an hour and a half late.
it was very ambitious.